So let's take a look at the moment as to how we got to this stage, and let's talk about it and those political tensions and the grabs that we've seen, the land grabs and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, with Foreign Affairs analyst James Marlow. James, thank you so much for joining me. So could you just remind us of the background of this particular invasion?
When discussing these things now, it's very difficult to know exactly how far back in time to go. So very briefly, I'm going to take you all the way back to 1917.
Right.
The Russian Revolution. The Bolsheviks took power from the Tsar, the kingdom. It fell. They were killed. Then came communism. Lenin took power. Speed forward to 1945. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was formed. It was a defense organization because it was concerned that communism was expanding. Now let's go forward to 2000. Vladimir Putin came to power. He always made it very clear that when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, it was a massive humiliation for what was known as Russia, also known at the time the USSR, Soviet Union.
Yes, I visited it.
The Russian leader said several times to leaders that he believed all the time that several countries should not have gone independent. There was about 15 of them that declared their independence, including the Ukraine. Now, last year we spoke many times about how the Russians were building up forces on the Ukrainian border. We talked about 96,000, it went up to over 100,000, 125, and then 150,000. During that time, Alexander Lukashenko, who stole the election from the Belarus people, he then allowed the Russian troops and the tanks to come into his country to quell the demonstrations against his government, which of course was put there because the government was initially, well, actually, the government was just, it took power by force.
Right.
We now got to a situation where the Russian troops then went south of Belarus on the border with Ukraine, and the West decided, because in 2014 that the Russians went into Crimea, and not a lot was said around the world. There were some noises which was made in the United Nations. There was talk of sanctions, etc., but not a lot was done. And also we have to remember, I'm doing this, of course, very, very fast, but we have to remember that in 2008, the Russians went into Georgia as well. So now Putin has got Georgia, he's got Belarus, and he was looking for a way to get Ukraine. That was always in his intention and his objective.
Well, of course, people say that actually Ukraine is the mother of Russia, because they say that Ukraine was actually the first part of Russia, and then it was Russia.
Nevertheless, there was an independence vote, a referendum in 1991, and out of that independence vote, 92.5% of the people voted for independence. Some of the Russian-speaking people in the southeast, the Donbass region, of course, Donetsk, which is very much in the news as well,
right,
and Luhansk, which is very much in the news, Russian-speaking people as well, they allied themselves to Putin. So Putin came up with this great idea and said, if you declare your independence, then it gives me an excuse to come into the country, which is exactly what happened. Anyway, to bring it up right up to now, we woke up Thursday morning to find that the Russians had invaded the Ukraine. They are now holding out. This is the Ukrainians holding out. This is the 11th day, I believe. But of course, we're talking about a superpower, a power with nuclear weapons.
Well, yes, a superpower with nuclear weapons, but, you know, there's the will of the people, and you might really, I mean, you might think you can mow down the land, but you're not going to get, you need to win the hearts and minds to actually make that sustainable. And so far, this is costing Vladimir Putin a fortune. I think somebody quoted about £15 billion a day. And obviously, with all the sanctions and the banks, Visa, MasterCard now not wanting to allow any transactions there and not allowing them. And then there's this meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister now with Russia and Ukraine, trying to broker talks. Why is he relevant to this whole thing, and why would he be the one that's trying to...
Well, Naftali Bennett, the Israeli Prime Minister, actually did something very unique. As a practicing Jew, he flew out during the Jewish Shabbat, the Sabbath as well, which is not done unless, of course, it's saving lives. And he felt that it was imperative, and he got advice to take that flight. He is close to the Russian leader. Israel is close to the Russian leader, and also the Ukrainian leader. President Zelensky is a Jewish person. That's why it's so offensive. It's so offensive for Putin to all the time say these are a bunch of neo-Nazis, fascists, drug-taking criminals who are killing the people of Ukraine as well. How offensive that is to all those people who went through.
But a lot of Russian people seem to be believing it.
Well, I'm not so sure that a lot of them are. Some of them want to come on the side of the Russian people. But Naftali Bennett is in this picture because he knows both sides. Now, Zelensky, and by the way, I should also add, there's more than 200,000 Jewish people inside of Ukraine as well, plus 15,000 Israelis. A lot of them have been evacuated. The Israelis are setting up a field hospital in the next couple of days as well. More than 50 Israeli doctors will be there on the west side. But Bennett is involved because he's trying to broker a peace deal. But you have to remember, to end on this note, that Putin is set on taking Ukraine, and he will not negotiate whatsoever. So we have to accept that Ukraine eventually, whether it falls in the next week or the next 2 months, unfortunately, it's going to happen. The question is, where does Putin go after that? And that's the big worry.
Well, and how does he maintain it? He might think he can take it, but he might not be able to maintain it because it's costing him a fortune, and the West are closing down in terms of sanctions, which I know he doesn't like. James, it's really good to talk to you. Thank you so much.